Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 138 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 64 of A Clash of Kings, that's Arya 10.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters' geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right. I've been up for more than a half hour, so...
That's good. He yawned on the intro, guys. So.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's not a good sign, is it? Yeah, it's definitely one of the more unusual recording times. Not only is it...
We've had a hectic week. It's not our fault. Some things have to be crammed in.
Yeah, we're pretty dang close to recording this live.
Yeah.
But you've had quite the week, I expect. We haven't really talked all week because you've been on vacation. So how was it?
Yeah, it was lovely. We went to the beach and we had a lovely time. It was very windy. The weather was nice. I swam in the sea. I mean, sea was cold, but I swam in the sea. But it was very windy. We have this badminton game called Speedminton, which we take to the beach, which is really fun and it's good, but it is difficult in the wind. My friend and Alex and I were playing, and we were facing the same direction. We were facing into the wind and just hitting it as hard as we could into the wind.
It was coming back like a boomerang.
It was.
Well, that's one way to play that game.
Oh yeah, I played for about an hour, and I am sore from playing that because I was just hitting it as hard as I could to try and get it to it.
Now that's not the traditional way to play the game. That was an adjustment you were making.
You play it facing each other like badminton, you know.
Okay.
The wind was not cooperating with that.
I was like, well, that's a ingenious game that you play into the wind like that. But no, that was you were having a take on the game. So any interesting stories develop while you were at the beach?
What you're fishing for
is
we went to a bar with our friends, Natalie and Alex, and we took our dogs with us because it was a dog-friendly bar. So we had our two dogs, and they have a bigger dog. They have like a 45-pound sort of Labrador type thing. And he's like 9 months old, and he's kind of puppyish, and he's very lovable, but he is big and strong. And we were sitting at high bar seats, and a dog came in. And
oh, no.
Kona, for 'tis his name, thought, a dog to play with. So he ran, but Natalie was holding him and was unaware. He pulled her hard, and he made her spin, and she yelped, of course, as you would do, attracting the attention of every human in the bar. And her chair went up on one leg and spun through like 360 degrees before she finally fell to the floor with a crump. So her mortification was complete.
As long as she is okay, that is a funny story. I guess it could be less funny if she got hurt.
We laughed all the way home because, of course, when you fall over in a bar, everyone thinks you're just a drunken buffoon. You know,
right? Yes. Woman can't keep her liquor. Oh well, that's I guess that's the dangers of sitting at a high bar stool and holding onto your dog's leash.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it took from the moment the dog first moved, it took 6 seconds before she hit the deck. I mean, it was just prolonged. You know, people were sipping their drinks watching.
What? Is she gonna fall? Is she gonna fall?
She might.
Oh, she's fallen.
Oh, yeah, she's falling now. Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Well, you weren't alone. Apparently, everybody in our city, except for Stacy and I, were at the beach this past weekend. Although, actually, Ethan was not there he's actually in the mountains this weekend. But last weekend, he had his fraternity formal, and so he was at the beach for that. And he wanted to take my van, my precious elderly van, because you can cram 7 people into it. So, that makes sense. So I I've let him. It's not the first time he's asked to take the van on a trip with a bunch of people. And so I let him take it, and it's about a 3-hour drive to the beach that they went to. And about 3 hours and 10 minutes after he left, I get a phone call with a rather panicked young man, son of mine. And he's like, Dad, I'm so sorry. And I was like, oh no, what'd you do? And he's like, I was trying to parallel park the van. And I was like, did you hit a car? And he's like, no, I didn't hit a car, but the front bumper got hooked onto one of those wooden slatted fences, and when I was backing up, I kind of almost pulled the bumper off. It's like sticking way out. And I was like, that car is 14 years old. Well, you can't treat it so roughly. So he's like, I know, it's like your fourth child. I was like, well, that's a good way to describe it. So, he was all worked up, and I was like, it's fine. I'm sure I can have that thing pushed back into place. Mm-hmm. So, it was fine. But then the next day he calls, and he's like, Dad, this van. And I was like, what now? And he's like, you didn't tell me that the driver's side window button had fallen out. And I was like, that's because it hasn't. It didn't fall out. I just drove it like 10 minutes before I gave it to you yesterday, and I can tell you that button was very much intact. What are you doing to my vehicle?
You said, I'm going to guess it's at least 6 years ago, you said something along the lines of, you're the only person who should drive that van because you and it are symbiotic.
Yes, very much, yes.
And presumably it's not really got better in that time. So.
Yes, that's a good point. I really do need to stop letting other people drive that van. It's never going to make
It'll go forever with you. But anybody else drives it, it's got about 20 miles left on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. It is my sigil. It is the keystone of my house sigil. So, oh man, my van made it to the beach also, but she fared about as well as Natalie. Oh man. Well, we do have a long show, but one thing I wanted to mention, because we've talked about it a bit on the Discord server, and I know we've talked about it a bit on the show, is I finished the show Last Kingdom this past week, and it finished as like the complete 180 of how poorly Game of Thrones finished is how well Last Kingdom finished. I really enjoyed the final season and the final episode and the final moments. It's just such a good show.
I've not started the final season yet, but I will upon your recommendation.
All right. So yes, I know you are very hesitant to take my recommendations.
I'm not hesitant. I enjoy it. I enjoy it just fine. I don't rave about it. It's good. It's fine. But now I know that the final season is fantastic, so I will enjoy that. It's
good stuff. I love all the characters are so well done, and it's just good stuff.
You would never overpromise, so.
That's right.
All right, let's get down to business. How did we leave Arya Stark? Last we saw of Arya, a full 17 chapters ago, she tricked Jaqen H'ghar into helping her free the captured Northmen, aided by a big pan of hot broth, by using his name as the next to die. That was her trick against Jaqen. Once the Northmen had the run of the castle, she was called before Lord Roose Bolton and honoured for her part in freeing the castle. As part of that honour, she was made his personal cupbearer. Jaqen magically changed his face, gave her a coin and a new catchphrase, Vala Mogulis. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
All right. Arya, a.k.a. Nan as she's going by these days, admires the growing collection of heads adorning the wall of Harrenhal. Many were household servants whose transgressions consisted of working for the Lannisters when they controlled the castle. She has a run-in with good wife Amabel, who blames Arya for the head's presence, and she's not the only one in the castle who feels that way. One of those heads belongs to good wife Hera, and Amabel swears to pay Arya back for what she's done when the Lannisters retake the castle.
Arya shakes free of Amabel and helps the hapless Elma Frey, who, unbeknownst to both of them, they're intended to get married in the future.
Right.
They are. He's the youngest Frey child, the youngest Frey son. And the youngest Frey son is supposed to marry the youngest Stark daughter. So these two are destined to be wed. And neither of them knew it. To clean some armour, and makes her way to the King's Spire Tower where Lord Roose Bolton has taken up residence. Roose lays naked in bed with leeches clinging to him.
Simon's squirming already
I mean, I don't know why they thought leeches were so efficacious against diseases, but I mean, you'd have to be really sick to want to try that. You know?
It's a last-ditch effort.
If I had a cold, I'll probably pull through. He's surrounded by Freys and a pseudo-maester named Qyburn. The Freys are lamenting their side's position in the war. They feel the army must leave Harrenhal. It's too big to hold, and there's not enough food to support them if they were besieged.
Roose is unconcerned about the imminent attack from Tywin's forces. Tywin, has his hands full in King's Landing, so they've got some time. But the Freys won't be talked out of their worries. If Tywin beat a seasoned man like Stannis Baratheon, what chance does the boy King Robb Stark have against him? The Frey men think Robb should bend the knee and make peace with the Lannisters.
When Roose argues Robb has beaten the Lannisters at every opportunity, the Freys fire back that he's lost the North, Winterfell, and his brothers are dead. At this, Arya, who, remember, is in the room, is stunned. She doesn't believe it could be true. Robb would never let the Lannisters take Winterfell. But she remembers that Robb isn't in Winterfell, and Bran and Rickon are only children. It's all she can do to hold back her tears.
Roose thanks his new in-laws for their counsel and dismisses them.
Does he dismiss them or their counsel?
Yes, probably both.
Dismisses both.
Yeah. Qyburn reads out a letter from Roose's new bride, Walda Frey, and Roose writes a letter of his own, not to Walda, to Helman Tallhart. He wants Tallhart and Robett Glover to attack Duskendale, and claims it's by command of the king. Arya wishes those two men, Tallhart and Glover, hadn't left Harrenhal so fast before she could decide whether to trust them with her secret. Roose announces that he will hunt today for wolves.
While Lord Bolton is gone, Arya cleans up his chamber and discovers a map of the Riverlands. She sees that Riverrun isn't that far from Harrenhal. Afterwards, she goes to the Godwood for some practice with the wooden stick that replaces Needle. When Roose returns with 9 dead wolves, she serves him dinner and asks whether he will take her with him when he goes north. An irked Roose says she'll stay here, Vargo Hoat will command the castle, and she'll serve him.
On her way back to the Godswood, she hears arguing from the Wailing Tower, the new home of the large Frey contingent. Elmer sits outside the tower in tears. It seems the family has been dishonored, and he won't be marrying a princess like he was supposed to do. Arya tries to commiserate, sharing news of her brother's deaths. Elmer couldn't care less and basically says as much.
Back at the Heart Tree in the Godswood, Arya prays for direction from the old gods. In the distance, a wolf howls. Her father's voice reminds her that when winter comes, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. That's enough for her. She wakes Gendry, feeds him a lie about the fate of the servants when Hoat takes the castle, possibly not a lie, and asks him to fetch swords. He's reluctant, but agrees to talk to Hot Pie about making an escape. She tricks a stable boy into preparing 3 horses for her and meets the boys by a postern gate. There she slits the throat of a guard, and off they go toward Riverrun.
Okay, this was a long, winding chapter. There's so much going on in this chapter that this episode could be 3 hours long, and we still might not cover everything.
Yeah. When we get to the comparison with the TV show, you'll see that it's comically short. Possibly because it was so long and winding, they had to sort of cut it all out.
That'll save us some time, I guess.
Yeah.
But Arya's feet must have been tired by the end of this chapter because she really never stopped moving. She was on the go around the castle all chapter long.
Yeah, I mean, because you said it serves her dinner, but of course she ran from his chambers to the kitchens back to serve him dinner.
Right.
It's like, they have on a Wiki of Ice and Fire, they have the maps mapping out each character's journey over the course of the books. this deserves a little bit for Arya. They should zoom in and show her
Right.
zipping across Harrenhal.
Yeah, she was back and forth and here and there and into the Godswood twice, his chamber multiple times, back and forth.
And this is Harrenhal. This isn't like Winterfell. I mean,
Right.
Everything is a schlep.
The Godswood alone is 20 acres. So the heart tree you would imagine is in the middle of the Godswood,
Oh,
which
that's
she
a good
was at
point.
twice. So
Right.
probably 10 acres out and back multiple times. Kids beat.
So it's a bit of a shock. Well, not necessarily a shock. I don't know exactly how to describe it. I mean, to discover that the Northmen are essentially no better than the Lannisters.
Right.
And now because of that, Arya's getting blamed. What once she was lauded as a hero for helping them to be rescued from the Lannisters' tyranny. Well, now she's blamed for the fact that they're under a different tyranny.
Yeah. I guess the word might be disappointment in the Northmen. You would have expected them to behave more like their benevolent overlords. The Starks would have wanted them to behave, but
Right. And actually that point led me to sort of think about sort of the lessons of leadership in this book. That possibly the most important thing that Robb could have done with his trusted lieutenants, such as Roose Bolton, was to instill his moral code on them.
sure.
To say, look, this is what I need. I trust you to make military decisions. I trust you to, but you've got to keep your men under control so that this, and this doesn't happen, you know?
Right. We are not the Lannisters. We're not going to behave like the Lannisters.
Right. I mean, it's also weird because the thing is, what do you gain from doing this? I mean, yes, his men get the satisfaction of being, doing whatever they want, and that sort of is a payment for their having come all this way south to fight. But all you're doing is alienating the people around you and making it more difficult to win this war.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's it's sad and disappointing. But so some of the heads on the wall that she is aware of because they're dipped in tar, and she can't see their faces because they face outward.
But she likes to imagine that one of them's Joffrey.
Yes, yes, and that the ravens are eating off his lips, or if she was a raven, she would eat off his pouty lips. But the maester, the Harrenhal maester, Tothmere, his head is on the wall, and his crime was that he sent ravens on behalf of the Lannisters. And one of the reasons that Gendry is upset with her about all this is that the armorer, Lucan, his head is on the wall, and Gendry liked him, so he's mad at her for that. And of course, as we mentioned in the summary, good wife Hera's head is on the wall, and her crime was that she told the staff to comply with the Lannisters when they took the castle. And even the steward's head is on the wall because he gave the keys to the treasure vault to Tywin, as if any of these people had any choice
Right.
but to do these things.
It's so cruel and pointless, and it's just it seems strange because Bolton comes across as being quite calculating, certainly cold and distant, very like Tywin in many ways. But the calculating part of you would say, don't do this. Yeah. Make them happy we're here, so that if the Lannisters come back and regain this place, they remember the good times.
Right. That Robb Stark is not just the king of the North; he's the king of the North and the Riverlands. So Roose is acting on behalf of the king of these people. They should be liberating these people from the clutches of the Lannisters, not making life worse.
Right, and blaming them for collaboration with the Lannisters is absolutely. I mean, it doesn't stand up to a split second's consideration. They had no choice,
Right. Yes.
Now those who use the Lannisters' presence to sort of settle a score with someone, sure, that's wrong, and maybe they should be punished. But those who just did what the Lannisters asked them, they had no choice.
It's a pretty good example of the good guy versus the bad guy being all about perspective. We like to think of the Starks as the good guys in this story, and the Lannisters as the bad guys. But if you are in Harrenhal and you're a servant in Harrenhal, you might not exactly agree with that.
I also think that the presence of the brave companions here sort of makes things a bit worse for everyone, because I think they have a sort of like a cruelty to them that's kind of infectious, and they've been on both sides of this and they keep going with the cruelty.
I think you're right. And Gendry mentions that as much. He mentions to Arya, he says, admiring your work, when Arya's looking at the heads on the wall. And she says, you hated Sir Amory Lorch as much as I did. And he said, yeah, well, at least he was serving his lord. These brave companions are just brutal, ruthless sellswords that, are no good for anybody. So, yeah, I think their presence is definitely not helping at all. And another thing about those heads is that she mentions once when there had been half as many heads. So the collection of heads is growing, which can only add to the stress and nervousness and unhappiness of the servants and the people in the castle, because you're being constant fear that your head's going to be the next one on the wall.
You were doing a list that I interrupted, but the last bit of the list was that Pretty Pia, and the other women who shared their favours with Lannisters are held in stocks and are being raped by anyone who fancies it, which is pretty awful, particularly for these women, because there was gossip against Pia, but it's almost certain that she wasn't really a willing companion of the Lannisters. She too was doing what she had to do to get by, so
certainly
she's basically being raped as punishment for being raped, which is
right.
Particularly awful.
Yes, quite. Yeah, Arya ran into her when the cook was making the weasel soup, he sent Arya to the buttery, which is where she works, and she was with a brave companion or a Lannister when Arya got there. So that's where we've seen her before.
So the one last crime of the brave companions is that they're rooting out Lannister supporters because they used to work for the Lannisters, so they know exactly who helped them. Now they're turning on those people and having them beheaded. It's good grief.
Terrible. That's just terrible. Yeah. I mean, the poor small folk, they just can't win regardless of who's in power here in the Riverlands. It's just...
I wonder if, when all this is said and done and Robb's king of the Seven Kingdoms, that he could do a sort of like a procession through Harrenhal where he sort of apologises. Look, that was Roose Bolton. He was off the chain. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let that happen. Or, if this goes the other way, Joffrey Baratheon could come through and say, look, that was Tywin Lannister. He's...
yes.
He is not a benevolent overlord like me.
Yes. Yeah. Like sweet, lovable Joffrey.
So Roose Bolton's in his chamber. It's packed. There are dozens of Freys. There's always dozens of Freys. They're like fleas on a dog.
They're like potato chips. You can't have just one. You can't have just one Frey.
And this Qyburn, so he's described as looking like a maester, but he doesn't have the robes, he has the robes but no chain. Right. And the rumour is that he had a chain, but he lost it by dabbling in necromancy. Which sounds like the right kind of guy for Roose Bolton, to be honest.
Yeah, and then there's a guy named Steelshanks Walton who appears to be Roose's headsman because when Gendry says to Arya when she's looking at the heads, "Are you admiring your work?" she says, "It's not my work. It's Steelshanks Walton's work." So it sounds like he must be a headsman type person for Roose. But you notice, you mentioned a bunch of Freys, Qyburn, Steelshanks Walton. I feel like it's noteworthy here that only the only House Frey is here. None of the other lords under Roose's control seem to be present in Harrenhal, or at least weren't here in this chamber advising him. So,
right, he tasks Tallhart and Glover with a mission outside of Harrenhal, leaving him with just the Freys.
Yeah. So I just found it noteworthy that he's only getting advice. It doesn't seem like he's necessarily keen on taking that advice. He shoots down basically every one of their concerns and bit of advice. And in fact, when I can't remember which Frey it is, says the king must be made to kneel to the Lannisters and make peace, Roose says, and who's going to be the one that tells him?
Yeah. But actually, the Freys do have a point because Harrenhal really is indefensible. There's nothing you can, especially now that the surroundings have been so damaged. There's no crops to sustain you, so you couldn't survive a siege.
True. Yeah, that's true. Although it's the same situation that Tywin would have been in had the Northmen and the Riverlands been sieged the Harrenhal when he was in there. And I think, I'm trying to remember, very early, it might have been the first Cat chapter when she was talking to Edmure and he suggested besieging Harrenhal, and I think she said we don't have the people for it or the time for it or something like that. But
yeah, it's a tricky one because it's strategically sort of important, but it's kind of a pain to own it.
Yeah,
you know? But also it's a pain to besiege it. So it's a slightly odd location.
Now the Freys did show up with 1,500 men, so they brought a big group with them under the command of Sir Aenys Frey, which we'll talk about later in background.
There is danger from the south. Presumably King's Landing is now secured. They could head north, and now they've got the help of the reach of the Tyrells, and they've got enough men to hold King's Landing and come back to Harrenhal and deal with that.
Right.
The question is it that strategically useful? I mean, honestly, I'm not sure. I think I would regroup if I was the Lannisters and maybe work back to the Westerlands and free my homeland of any more Northmen before worrying about the Riverlands.
Right. I think that's a solid point. I imagine the people in Harrenhal are in the Frey. First of all, the Freys are always afraid of.
They're always hedging their bets, basically.
Right. And but yeah, I mean, he does have his hands full in King's Landing, Tywin, that is, but he could do the things that he needs to do in King's Landing and send an army out under the leadership of his brother Kevin if he wanted to. But like you said, I just don't know that there is a need to go do that.
Yeah, it feels like if I were them, I'd be more interested in regaining the lost territories in the west.
Right. I'm wondering, would Tywin even know that Harrenhal is no longer under the command of Amory Lorch?
Yeah, possibly not. Yeah,
unless he's been sending ravens to
Roose Bolton by mistake, feeding him all this information.
Yeah, I get the real difference. I mean, the difference between when Tywin marched out of Harrenhal and now is that he has the Reach army, which is a huge army. So that's definitely, they're right. That the Freys are right to be concerned that, oh goodness, we were facing a foe that had about 20,000 soldiers, and now are facing a foe that has 60 to 80,000 soldiers, maybe even more.
The other thing I think he has to very carefully balance is this relationship with the Tyrells, because the Tyrells have done him a solid here. The Tyrells were Team Renly at one point.
Right.
Now they've helped the Lannisters secure the throne. The Lannisters needed that help. There's no doubt about it. King's Landing was besieged. It looked bad. Tywin's own children and grandchildren were in serious danger. The Tyrells came and helped with that. Now, if I'm Tywin, I feel a huge debt now to the Tyrells. And if I'm going to repay that debt by first saying, hey, could you come march like 500 miles north and free a castle that we don't care about from the Northmen that are there? If I were the Tyrells, I'd be like, why? Come on.
Why are we messing with that?
I mean, sure, we've got a big army, but we've also got crops to go deal with,
Yeah, I guess a lot depends on whether this Marjorie Tyrell, Joffrey Baratheon betrothal offer has gone through. If it has, then the Tyrells will be, linked to the crown by marriage. So, they might feel obligated to act as part of the force of the crown.
Of course, regardless, they'll still feel obligated. But at the same time, they bestirred themselves when others weren't doing to help the Lannisters. So the Lannisters are in their debt, and the Lannisters pay their debts, And
That's
maybe
true.
they think Marjorie marriage to Joffrey is sufficient payment of that debt. But I would say there's got to be some give and take here. And Harrenhal just doesn't seem that important to me.
Oh, no, I agree. I think, so the Freys' overall concern is that their overall army, Robb's army, is no longer sufficient to contend against this new Lannister Tyrell combined force.
And that is true. And then maybe that is a reason for Tywin and the Tyrells to muster as large a single force as they can and head north towards Riverrun.
Right.
And because then they could engage Robb and win and crush him.
Yes. And basically, Hostine Frey puts it out there. He says the war is lost. Robb must make peace with the Lannisters. Like there's no other way to interpret what he says than we're defeated. We must yield. So, and then Roose responds with, well, Robb's beaten the Lannisters every time he's faced them, which is true. But like we've been talking about, that was when the Lannisters were solo. Now they're a combined force, which is significantly larger. So, and while we're, they're currently a combined force at King's Landing, whereas Robb's got his men spread all across the Riverlands, which makes him even more vulnerable.
Right, absolutely. That's very true. Of course, at this point, Arya learns that Bran and Rickon are dead. At least that's the news that's reached Harrenhal.
Right.
And she does an amazing job to maintain her composure, having heard this news, because, of course, nobody else knows that they're talking about her brothers.
Right, yes, right.
But I will say here that I think Hostine is overstating the loss of the North. I mean, obviously, if they understand what's gone on in the North, they know the North is not lost. They know they could march back up there and take it in half an hour.
Yes.
But there is a symbolic power to having lost Winterfell, even temporarily.
Yes, I agree. They do seem to be overlooking the fact that Sir Roderick is putting together a force, and the Wyman Manderley is sending a force to retake Winterfell. And if they knew how lightly Winterfell was held by Theon, they would feel a lot more secure about their ability to recover it. But yes, you're right. It's not so much that Robb's loss of Winterfell in the north, and I wouldn't say they lost the north yet either. I mean, they lost some pockets of the north. It's not like Robb lost a battle that lost them the north. He's not in the north, and some people took advantage of that situation. So it's more of a reflection on Robb's persona, on their confidence in Robb that he can't even keep his homeland under control, than it is about something that Robb did that caused it, aside from his comprehension of old grudges of the previous generation. He failed to realize what the Stark and Greyjoy grudge really truly meant.
So at this point, Bolton kicks everybody out apart from Qyburn. Qyburn reads Bolton a letter from Roose's new wife, Walda Frey. And this inspires Roose Bolton to write a letter, not to Walda Frey, but to Helman Tallhart, telling him to take Darry and put the captives to the sword and burn the castle. Darry's been sort of a little bit of a minor fulcrum of the story. This is where Lady was put to death, where Joffrey was injured by Nymeria when Nymeria was chased away. And also, historically, the Darrys were Targaryen loyalists, right? Right. Am I remembering that correctly? That's not like me.
Yeah, and first of all, before we move too far on from Roose and the Freymen, I gotta say, it is quite the power move for Roose to be laying there naked in bed while all these men are around counseling him. He's just there naked as the day is long. And meanwhile, his men have to act like there's nothing odd about this situation and just discuss the day's events while staring at the naked guy, or not. Averting their eyes, probably more likely.
Spare a thought for Arya. She's the one who has to lift the leeches off him. Yeah, it's even nastier.
That's a good point. Yeah, another thing about Darry and his decision. So what he decides, I think, did you just mention that he decide what he tells Tallman is put the Lannister men that he captured to the sword and burn the castle? A couple questions about that, but mainly being why? Why?
Just why?
Why burn Darry?
It's not Lannister land.
Right.
If it was in the west, sure, but this is part of the Riverland.
Yes, which now falls under the control of his king, of Robb Stark. And just one more one more connection between Roose and Darry is that his wife, Walda, is the daughter of Mariah Darry, who is the aunt of Lyman Darry, who was the young lord that took over after his father, Raymond Darry, was killed, and then Lyman was killed. So now Mariah Darry is one of the last remaining Darrys, and he's having his mother-in-law's castle put to the torch, which is never a great idea for family dynamics, I have to say.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Especially when it's a castle that lives on the lands that now belong to your liege. It's really strange. And it goes to, again, this feeling that Roose has been off camera almost this whole story to this point.
Right, yeah.
And we got the feeling that he was a little sinister, a little scary, but loyal to Robb and thoughtful and made good strategic decisions and things. Well, with some question marks, but honestly, I blamed Robb for the whole Greenform thing. But anyway, but he seems like he's just a psychopath. I mean, he's just killing people on their side for the fun of it.
Yes, you're right.
And charging his men to do the same.
Yeah, I was trying to think about why logically he might put Darry to the torch, and maybe it's to keep the Lannisters from retaking it and finding a safe harbor. I mean, but
probably it's to stop the Lannisters from retaking it and putting the people to death for siding with the Boltons. I'll kill you all in advance. Right. That way the Lannisters won't get you.
So that the second part of that letter that he sends to Helman Tallhart is that Tallhart and Robett Glover are to attack Duskendale. And he says that Tallhart lost a son and Glover lost a castle. Let them take their vengeance there. And what he's referring to is Tallhart's son was Benfred Tallhart, who was the leader of the Wild Hares that was massacred by Theon's Reavers and then drowned as a sacrifice to the drowned god. Robett is the brother of Galbart Glover, who is the lord of Deepwood Motte, which is the castle that Arya has taken. So,
one of the pockets of the north that has been lost.
Right. But I question what the strategic value of taking Duskendale is. It just spreads the forces further out, and what is to gain by randomly going and attacking Duskendale?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Duskendale is a little bit interesting because it's much further south, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot closer to King's Landing. It's closer to King's Landing than it is to Harrenhal.
Yeah, it's not that far north of Rosby, which is pretty close to King's Landing.
So you're taking the fight to them to a certain extent. Maybe you're trying to, destroy the lands that will support King's Landing over the coming winter.
Yeah.
Which seems a little bit smarter than destroying the lands that are trying to support you.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to secure food for themselves while they're at it, take those lands, but it just seems to be spreading the men out further and moving them much closer to the now heavily fortified King's Landing.
The one thing you could do is you sort of could reverse the way, I mean, not to a certain extent, this is how Roose has been fighting all along, but maybe splintering your force into smaller groups and have them be sort of like guerrilla forces that attack Lannister strongholds possibly is a good idea. Possibly could be a way to avoid being decimated by their huge army.
Spread them out, yeah. Make them deal with you in little pockets, I guess, but you're also easier to deal with in little pockets, especially if you have such overwhelming numbers that the Lannisters and Tyrells do these days. But Tallhart, he is supposed to be at the Twins keeping Walder Frey honest, but Edmure sent him to help in the Riverlands, And he also sent Roose to Harrenhal. So none of this stuff that is being said to having been done on the king's command is actually being done on the king's command. Because, we mentioned in the summary, but I think forgot to mention it here. Roose ends the letter by, saying, go take Duskendale at the king's command. But we at least have not been aware of any announcement from the king, any proclamation that this is to be done. So I think a lot of this is like, Robb would probably agree to this.
Yeah, and then you've planted a seed of worry in me that Tallhart is no longer trying to keep the Freys on side at the twins, and now we're hearing the Freys kind of casting doubt over Robb's ability to win.
Right.
We know that they hold only loosely to which side of the war they're on.
Right.
They like to be on the winning side.
Yes.
So this is troubling news for Robb, I think.
I agree. Which is probably why he would want Tallhart and his men firmly stationed in the twin. Although, there wasn't that many of Tallhart's men. So if the Freys decided to turn, they probably could handle them fairly quickly, I would guess.
Right, but I guess the point is, that they're there keeping an eye on you, so you can't be too obvious, or you have to be obvious. I mean,
right.
Those are your two choices,
True.
So Arya regrets the fact she didn't get to talk to Tallhart and Glover before they left, because she helped rescue Robett Glover from the cells, although it turned out there was a plan in place anyway that was supposed to happen. But she was thinking that he was one of the people she might be able to confide her true identity in and get whisked out of here. But he's now left, and she's only got the Freys and Roose Bolton, and I wouldn't tell them anything.
Yeah. Last chapter, we were so convinced that she'd been saved. Her flag, the Stark flag, is flying the highest on the castle, and we felt like she's been. The Northmen have moved in. She's the princess of the King of the North, the sister of the King of the North, so all should be good. But like you said, with all but Bolton and Freys gone, that's significantly more risky to announce who you are. If there were other lords there, if Tallhart and Glover had been there, and she announced who she was, you could feel a lot more confident that more than just, if Roose knows this information and doesn't share it, then he can only wield this to his advantage.
Yeah.
If other lords know, then there's less that he can do aside from return her like he's supposed to.
Poor Tallhart. Every castle he goes to, the citizens are like, well, we might have to kill that guy to keep him quiet.
Although I will say, we're disparaging Roose a little bit because he's making some unusual decisions. But he did say all the right things to the Freys' worries. He had Robb's back in every complaint or concern that they had. So,
Yes, he absolutely did. I mean, he's rock solid in his fealty, it seems, but he is not helping the cause with his actions.
Right. Yeah, which makes you wonder about him, makes you wonder about his character and the kind of person he is because of those things.
So the Riverlands are overrun with wolves at the moment. So Roose decides to go on a wolf hunt. We think of Arya at this. We think of Nymeria at this point, of course, and Arya too, because this comes on hot on the heels of the Darry conversation. She remembers Lady and Mrs. Nymeria, etc.
Right.
So,
I gotta say, I would love to see an animated Call of the Wild type series about the wolves of the Riverlands. Watch how Nymeria unites them and rules them and what their social structures and daily lives are like.
Theoretically, it might just be the wolves of the Riverlands are like, hey, let's gang together.
Well, that's true. There's a lot of destruction, maybe some plenty of bodies to feed on and stuff, I guess. But
over the week, actually, my friend Alex was talking to me about a thing that he saw advertised. I don't remember the name of it, but I'm not sponsored, so I don't care. But it was a sort of, you take an existing book, and this thing is kind of like an interactive model of of working with the book, where you can go into different locations or follow different characters than the book, the actual book does. And I thought Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire, would be a perfect recipe for that, because you could follow the characters off when they're off stage. You could follow what they were doing and see their perspectives. And I don't know how it works. I don't know if it's any good, but it sounded like it was an interesting thing that you could. Basically, the text for the things that aren't actually written in the book are generated by AI based on what happened in the book.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. That would be really cool. Especially, for A Song of Ice and Fire, there's so many characters that you would love to know.
Exactly. Like, 'cause I think that's what you can do at any point as you're reading along. You can go, what the hell is Sansa up to right now? And it would flick over to Sansa. At this moment, Sansa is,
that's really neat. I like that.
I might be totally misrepresenting it. In fact, I might be giving away the multi-billion-dollar idea that we should be working on right now. This might just be a choose-your-adventure garbage. I don't know.
I loved those as a kid.
Me too.
But about this wolf hunt, aside from my desire for an animated series based on Nymeria and her wolves.
Just read the extended book. I mean,
right. Do you think this is symbolism for his internal debate and struggle to whether to stay loyal?
Oh, you mean him going off killing wolves?
Yes, coming back with 9 dead wolves, 2 pups. I just wonder, is that he could have gone off and killed on a pheasant hunt or.
Yes, or lion hunt, ideally.
But he went and killed on a wolf hunt. It just lines up, I guess.
The wolves were bothering everyone.
True, but, yes, and that's
a good point.
That's the obvious reason, is there are wolves everywhere, and they're killing horses and, going into villages and stuff, but it's also ripe with, it's ripe for some symbolism there.
Oh, for sure. So while he's gone, Arya takes a peek at the map of the Riverlands, and she discovers that Riverrun is not as far from Harrenhal as she feared. A doable distance. Last she knew of Robb, he was in the Riverlands. She's heard about Edmure's success. She thinks this could happen. And this inspires her to start hatching a plan to get out of here.
Yeah, I think this is the first seed, or one of the first seeds into hatching this plan. I think as we go through this chapter, we can see the things tick off that lead to the ultimate decision to leave, and now being the moment to leave. Not the least, which has already happened, is discovering that Bran and Rickon are dead. I think that might have stirred something in her there.
Yeah.
But then this is another realizing, Riverrun's not that far. And I know, because I've heard the people talk about the fact that Robb has been in Riverrun, and my uncle, my grandfather. I don't think she knows yet that Cat is in Riverrun. I don't think there's been any mention of that.
No, yeah.
But I think, she is aware that she's got family there, and now she sees on a map, it's just over yonder. Right.
Yes. Compared to what she's already done, it is relatively close.
Yes.
So while she's in the Godswood practicing with the wooden sword, or just a wooden stick, in fact, she sees ravens returning to the rookery, and that's perhaps later on she hears Elmer Frey bemoaning the news that he's heard.
Right.
So maybe that's what this raven was about.
Yeah, he says there was a letter. There's been a bird from the twins. So she just saw him right before she saw that raven, and he was talking about his princess, and now he's crying that he's not going to marry his princess. So I think that does fit. But about that, the raven and the rookery, it got me thinking that the death of Maester Tothmere is kind of an important detail, because if he was still alive, I could envision Arya bringing a letter to him saying it's from Roose. She has access to his desk and his papers and stuff. She could write a letter to Riverrun that says, "I'm here, come rescue me," seal it with Roose's seal, take it to Tothmere and say, "My lord has requested you send this to Riverrun. Do not open it." But with his death, you have to assume Qyburn is handling the rookery. And
unless Qyburn's crime was crimes against ravens, in which case you might not want to put him in charge of it.
His crime was mail fraud. I just, I don't know that Qyburn has the kind of respect and the personality to just do what he's told as a maester.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't try that plan if Qyburn was in charge.
That's
of the
my
Ravens.
point.
Heck
yes.
no. The maester of Harrenhal, sure, he might do it anyway, turn a blind eye, but not with Qyburn. Qyburn is clearly Bolton's man.
Right. So that's why I think the death of Maester Tothmere
is another element in her wanting to get out of there.
Yeah, and another element of why she can't be rescued by her family.
Right.
It would be much easier for Edmure to send men to Harrenhal to get Arya than Arya making her way to Harrenhal.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
So Roose comes home. I can't remember what book he burns.
That was my question. There's no mention of what book. I just found it curious that he's reading a book when she walks in, and then just tosses it in the fire. And what I wondered was, what was that book? Why would he toss a book in the fire? What an odd thing to do. So I have no answer. I don't know what the book is. I can't recall. I meant to research to see if anybody had any theories online. I forgot to do that.
Did Tywin read a book in Harrenhal?
Good question. I can't remember. But hey, we'll discuss it on the Discord server.
Sounds good. Arya broaches the thought of whether or not she's going with him when he goes back north. He says no, she's going to stay here with Vargo. But he also says, if you ever talk to me again, I'm going to cut out your tongue, which is... that was kind of him to give her a warning.
Right, yes. Yeah, she thinks to herself, he'd do it just as easily as someone else would cuff the back of someone's head for being disobedient. Yeah. So I think the first thing there is it smart to leave Hoat in charge of Harrenhal? He's already turned cloak once. Do we really want to be leaving him in charge of a Riverlands castle at this point?
Honestly, I see the brave companions as such a viper that I wouldn't actually want to hold them close. Leave them guarding outposts that I don't particularly care about, and if they turn cloak, big deal.
Right?
You
know?
I wouldn't want to bring them to Riverrun and have them turn cloak there.
Send them to the charred remains of Darry. You guard this.
Right, exactly.
Don't let anybody in here.
So it's in terms of protecting Harrenhal, it's not a great idea. But larger scale, I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is another one of those instances where I think seeded her decision to leave right now. If he had said, yes, I'm taking you with me when I go north, would she have stayed in his service, hoping to get back north with him?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, she would, very quietly, like a mouse.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because once she's north of the neck, it's much safer for her to reveal herself as Arya Stark. And but then we also know the Victorian was sailing for the neck last we saw.
Greyjoy, right? Victorian Greyjoy.
That's been a little while ago, so he could already have shut down travel to the north, which could be problematic for that plan. But then again, so she goes north, but she just heard that Winterfell was taken, the north has been taken, and her brothers have been killed. So does Winterfell lose its appeal as a final destination, now making Riverrun the more appealing location to go rather than Winterfell?
Yeah, well, plus the threat to have her tongue cut out, I would probably see that as a reason to get away from Roose Bolton as well, promptly.
Yes.
If he said, I'm heading north, and yes, you're coming with me, but if you ever speak again, I'm going to cut out your tongue, I might still leave. But
No.
North would be nice, but tongue, definitely better.
Yeah, and we know Arya, of all the people who are least likely to hold their tongue, she'd be she'd be high on the list.
True.
So she's dismissed after the threat to have her tongue removed by Roose Bolton, and she's on her way back to the Godswood, and she comes across the Wailing Tower, which is now home of the Freys, and young Elmar is sitting on the steps of the tower crying, and he says that they've just received a bird. She can hear arguing going on in the Wailing Tower, raised voices and such, and Elmar explains that there's been a bird from the twins and that their house has been dishonored and that he is no longer going to marry the princess that he was so excited to marry. And of course, then they get into a fight, and because Arya tries to commiserate, she says, "Oh, I think my brothers might be dead too." And he says, "Who cares about the brothers of a serving girl?" And then Arya responds with, "I hope your princess dies," which is, there's a whole bunch of irony going on here.
But the big question here, of course, is what is this? This is weird. So Elmer was promised to marry the princess,
right?
As part of the deal for Robb Stark's forces to cross at the twins. That was part of that deal.
Right.
That's payment for that deal. The Freys have kept their end of that bargain. They let the armies across.
Right.
Now their payment is being reneged on. Why would the Freys do that?
Right.
The Freys wouldn't do that, you'd think. That would be a Robb Stark thing. But why would Robb tell the Freys, "I'm no longer going to pay you what I promised you"?
That is the question. So the statement from Elmar is very vague. My house has been dishonored. Does that mean that there's been dishonor done to House Frey, or that someone in House Frey has done something dishonorable, and now at least this part of the deal is off? Maybe the one of the Freys did something dishonorable, and so the Freys and the Starks have cut what the Starks have to do in order to fulfill the promise or the agreement. So yeah, it's a very vague statement.
Yeah.
But it's certainly
it would be hard to pin a Frey for dishonor, though. Everything they do is so sort of like forked tongue that they could probably wriggle it out.
That's true. You have to be very lenient when it comes to such things with the Freys, or else you'll constantly be telling them you're dishonoring me. But it certainly seems like the Starks are involved, because the princess he was supposed to marry is Arya, and now he's not marrying the princess. So it certainly seems like something to do between the Freys and the Starks.
Right. The other part of that is, I mean, coming back to the fact that Helman Tallhart is no longer at the twins keeping an eye on things, I do worry that the Freys are hatching something.
Certainly, yeah.
Basically, that they've come up with some other plan, which means that they no longer need the payment for what they did. Maybe they now shut the twins to Robb, and so Robb will be stuck. Oh God, that's getting me worried now.
Yeah, it's certainly a concern.
If the Lannisters come north in force and the north is forced to retreat, if they can't get back across the twins, that could be real trouble.
Yes, it certainly could.
And you know that if someone offered the Frey something better, they would jump at it.
And you have to wonder, do the Starks even know that the Freys feel dishonored? If it's something the Starks did, the Freys might not even have let on that they're aware of that they have been dishonored. So
worries.
Yeah,
worries.
Definitely.
So back in the Godswood, on her 8th mile of the chapter, she prays for a sign, and she hears the wolf howling, and she hears her father's words. So these things, I think, basically confirm her suspicion that she needs to make a plan to get out of there right now.
Right.
Now is the time.
I think that was the final of the keys to fall into place here, is asking for a sign and then hearing. I mean, they probably hear wolves howl. Roose said he can't sleep from all the howling. So it's probably not that uncommon, but she's looking for a sign, and right as she asks, a wolf howls. And that's when she breaks her wooden stick that she's been using as a sword and says, "I'm a wolf. I'm no longer going to use wooden teeth." So she gets a sign. She decides, okay, that's it. That's enough. I'm out of here. she goes and talks to Gendry, tells him a story about the foot being cut off, all the servants' foot being cut off, and he doesn't exactly agree. He says he will go talk to Hot Pie, and but he does. He comes and meets her, and Hot Pie is with him. But there's a guard, of course, at the gate, and so she says to the boys, "I got this. You stay here with the horses. I'm going to take care of the guard." And she realizes when she gets to the guard, he's wearing chainmail, so she doesn't think she has the power to stab through the chainmail with her dagger. He's too tall for her to slash his throat while he's standing there. So on the spot, she comes up with this plan that she has been sent by Roose Bolton to give all of his guards a silver coin. But the only silver coin she has is the one that Jaqen H'ghar gave her with the Valor Morghulis saying. And so she pretends like she's going to hand it to him and drops it. And so he bends down and picks it up, which exposes his throat right at her level. And of course, she slashes his throat and he dies.
This guy did not know Roose Bolton, because any knowledge of the man would have suggested that this was a trick.
Right. Yeah, that was her concern, because he's a Roose Bolton man. So she thought, I don't know that I could trick him as easily. But apparently, when silver is involved, you're willing
you lower your guard.
Yeah, you're willing to take the risk.
This is the second person she's murdered now. I mean, she may have killed some people in the battle at the Holdfast, but she killed the stable boy in King's Landing, which was partly accidental, right? I mean, she didn't really... This was way more on purpose.
Yes, she turned around. He was there. She just reacted and stabbed him, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. She has had people murdered, of course, thanks to Jaqen H'ghar.
Right. Chiswick and Wheeze.
Chiswick and Wheeze.
But I'll say about this, she's 10-ish. I think she's 10 now. I mean, she hasn't mentioned her birthday exactly.
You think she should be able to reach his throat without any subterfuge?
She is younger than the Hound says he was when he killed his first man. He said he was 12 when he killed his first man.
Huh.
Arya's now killed 2 people at the ripe age of 10. So...
In your face, the Hound.
So, yeah, the Hound's bragging about being 12. Yeah. Arya's like, hold my mead. But yeah, it's actually, I mean, it's disturbing that this young girl has now physically herself killed 2 people and had 2 others killed. It's very scary.
But think about the way her life is. You know, think she's got Roose Bolton threatening to cut her tongue out. You know, sort of like the killing of people is only a small step from there. For you and I, as 10-year-olds, it would be an enormous step. But
yes,
for
true.
Arya, it's much closer to the reality of the world. You know.
Yes, that's true. It's just I just worry about the impact it will have on her. You know,
it's not great
going forward.
But then again, everything she's going through is having an impact on her. You know?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
All right, just some background.
I did gather a little background for us. So one of the fun things about having Freys in a chapter is there's usually a lot of them, and it gives you a chance to discuss where they are in birth order and who they're married to and who their kids are.
When you said Aenys brought 1,500 Frey men, I was like, are they all Freys?
They might be. They very well just might all be Freys. So like you just mentioned, Sir Aenys Frey, he is the man technically in charge here of the Frey lot. And he's in his mid-50-ish, possibly early 60s. He is the 3rd son of Lord Walder and Lord Walder's first wife, Para Royce. And with the death of Sir Stevron, he is now the 2nd oldest living Frey child. He has 2 sons, Aegon, or Aegon Bloodborne as he is known. And this book, A Clash of Kings appendix, lists him as an outlaw. So it's that going for him. As well as another son named Rhaegar. And Aenys' wife, Tyanna Wild, was her maiden name. She died giving birth to Rhaegar about 30-ish years or so ago. And then the next oldest Frey here, or at least that are mentioned, she mentions that there's a dozen Freys in the room, but only like, what, right. 1, 2, 3, 4, only 5 get a reference in the room, right. or named. Jared Frey, he's 50-ish, and he is the fifth child, fourth son. Only his older sister Perianne is between him and Aenys in birth order.
Yeah.
And he is the first child of Lord Walder's second wife, Kyrena Swan?
I would say Sirena.
Sirena Swan, Cyrenna Swan. Now, Jared is married to his cousin. You know, when you're dealing with Freys, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
if you marry within 100 miles of the twins, it's going to be a cousin.
Right. So his cousin Alice Frey is his wife. It's unclear where in the family tree, you know, how distant of a cousin she is, but she has died, according to the Storm of Swords appendix. They had 2 children, a boy named Titus and a daughter named Kyra. Then the next oldest Frey mentioned is Hostine. He's in his 40s-ish, and he is the 7th child. There is another brother named Luceron who is between Jared and Hostine, but it's unsure if he's present. If he's present, he doesn't say anything that Arya mentions or that Arya hears. Now, Hostine is the first child of Lord Walder's third wife, Amari Crakehall. Now, we've heard Hostine's name a few times. Sansa noticed him at the Hands tourney. Ser Jorah mentioned beating him at that tourney at Lannisport that he won that set his life down the path that it went down. And it was also, he was mentioned being at the Twins when Cat was there. He has one son, Arwood, to his wife, Belana Hardwick. And so those are the Frey, those with the last name Frey. There's also Harry's Haig, who is the oldest son of Perianne Frey, who I just mentioned a minute or two ago, and her husband Leslin Haig. And he's got 2 younger brothers, Donnell and Alan Haig. And then there's a natural-born Frey there, Ronald Rivers. There's really not much to say about him. There's not a whole lot of info. Several older and younger baseborn siblings. Of the named siblings, baseborn siblings, he is the second youngest named. So, okay. But there's not a whole lot to say about him. And then we get young Elmar, who is, like Arya said, he's roughly her age. He's 9-ish, 10, something like that. And he is the 22nd born son, the youngest son, second youngest child, I believe, of Lord Walder. And the 4th son of Walder's marriage to Inara Faring, who I believe is his 7th wife, and he's currently on number 8.
Right.
So, there we go.
Wow. That's a big chunk of tree right there. Well, this is just a small sapling of the Frey tree.
Yeah, it's a big tree.
Comparison with the television show, there's nothing to compare here. In the show, Roose Bolton is still with Robb in the Westerlands or Riverlands.
Right,
it's a little bit unclear where they are. Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie do escape Harrenhal together with Jack and Hagar's help. She uses her last wish to get out of Harrenhal, and he kills the guards for her.
Okay, yeah. So they switched Roose's character with Tywin's character in the TV show, right?
Right, she was cupbearer to Tywin, and it was really fascinating, those scenes.
Yes, I remember watching that video where they were interviewing a lot of the cast and asking them if they read the books, and Maisie Williams, I believe she said one of the things she didn't read the books, I don't believe, but she said one of the things she was most surprised about is that there was no Tywin Lannister, Arya Stark interaction like she had in the TV show.
Pedantry Corner. So just one very small thing. There's a lovely sentence in this chapter, which right at the start of the chapter when she's looking at the heads. The carrion crows wheeled about the gatehouse in raucous unkindness. Now that's lovely. That's lyrical and poetic.
Yes.
Just a point of order, though. The collective noun for crows is a murder of crows, and the collective noun for ravens is an unkindness of ravens. So if these are carrion crows, wouldn't they wheel about the gatehouse in a raucous murder?
Yes, I see your point.
Just a thought. I mean, he might be using the word, he might be, sort of like, the word has 2 meanings, and he might be just sort of like trying to bring... But then maybe we're supposed to conflate the two. Maybe we're supposed to think that Arya just committed an unkindness to the guard at the posting gate.
Right, yes.
Not a murder. It's just an
unkindness.
News and notes.
News and notes. So we have added a new Buy Me a Coffee tier, and it's got some cool stuff to it. Obviously, you get the early episodes, which you were getting with the previous and the other tier, but you also get an invitation to our live video chat. And we came up with this cool idea where you write the summaries, and we will read them.
I like it. So they pay us to do the work for us. I like it a lot.
Exactly. So, of course, we will reserve the right to change it as necessary for, time constraints. And if you put a bunch of inappropriate stuff that we don't feel appropriate saying, we will make adjustments. But yes, you write the summaries. We will, of course, give you credit on the show for writing the summary. But yeah, those are the things that we have added to our new tier. So go check it out at our Buy Me a Coffee site. And of course, if you're listening to this in like a year or so from now, things could change. So please go check out the specifics. Don't take my word that this is exactly how it will be forever.
We just wanted to thank everyone for the ratings we've been given on Spotify. That's really boosted our numbers on Spotify, and we're higher up in search hits now, so that's helping us get the word out. Thank you very much. Same goes for Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Keep up the good work. And the Ice and Fire Con is this week. And when I say this week, I mean the week that this episode is released. When you're hearing it, Ice and Fire Con is this week, the 21st through the 24th of April in Mount Sterling, Ohio. So have a great time to any of you who are going. It looks like it's going to be a blast. And of course, we are sponsors of that event. So we have a vested interest in you all having a great time there.
All right, let's draw a line under this one. So Roose Bolton is worse than we feared. He appears to be loyal to Robb, sure, but he's malicious and cruel, and that's not helping Robb's cause on a larger scale.
Yeah, and the Freys appear to be concerned about their allegiance to Robb.
Yes, they don't like to be on the losing side.
No, they sure don't. They really don't. And they picked a side, and if it looked like this side was the winner, and now that it doesn't, that makes you a little nervous. But Roose rebuffed all their fears. But as we said at the beginning of this episode, they seem to be the only other major house that's here advising them. So will their lack of support begin to weigh on him and sway him?
The sort of like traditional image of an angel on a shoulder and a devil on a shoulder. He's only got people on one shoulder.
Right, he's walking very lopsided.
There's no other voice. Yes.
It would be very bad for Robb if Roose did turn on him, because Roose is leading this Eastern Front, which is very close to King's Landing, and it's very important to Robb's success. And he's put a lot of faith and trust in Roose. So if Roose were to betray him, that would be very bad. So let's hope he stays honest. Yeah.
And of course, the worry here is that the Freys are considering flipping to the Lannisters. If they don't get their way and they don't convince Robb to bend the knee to the Lannisters, could the Freys switch sides? And this, maybe Elmer learning that he's no longer going to marry Princess Arya, is a sign of that, is a sign that they are pulling back from their previous treaties in order to switch sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's certainly concerning. There's a lot of concerning things going on here. Yep. Why Duskendale? As I asked earlier, I'm still not quite sure. I don't think we've come to a very good conclusion as to why Duskendale. It seems like an odd, unnecessary move. Maybe there's genius hidden in it that we don't understand yet. We'll have to see. It doesn't make a lot of sense up front, though. I'll say that.
Yeah. The North is in trouble now. Now that the Reach has chosen its side, the North is clearly outmatched in the field here. So the Lannisters have still got a lot of things to sort out. They need to secure King's Landing. They've got problems in their home Westerlands. But once all that's dealt with, Robb's in trouble.
Yes. Yes, that's the simple response there is yes, that doesn't bode well for King Robb and his forces. They're going to be heavily outnumbered now. And speaking of King Robb, there's a lot of as the king commands going around with no word from the king. So, a lot of people are taking it for granted that they know what the king would want done here.
Yep. So Arya finally decides to take action. The idea of being left behind with Vargo Hoat, hearing of Bran and Rickon's death, the gods reminding her the wolf needs to stick with their pack. All of these have led her to truly escape. And we wish her well.
Yes, and this is the last Arya chapter of the book, and it was quite the doozy. So
yeah, it was.
Well, looks like we'll pick her up again in Storm of Swords, but quite the way to finish the Arya arc in this book here.
So there's 3 ways you can help us. You can leave us a positive review. Nothing helps spread the word more than that. We would appreciate it. You can buy merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, and you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold and become a sustainer at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal.
And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and of course, Discord.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.